My dear friend, I want you to imagine this. You're sitting in a room in the middle of a casual conversation. Suddenly, someone says something that makes you feel belittled. Their voice carries a touch of arrogance. Their eyes seem to say they're above you. The whole room suddenly feels heavy. In that moment, you may choose silence. You swallowed the words you wanted to speak, hoping to keep the peace. But inside, you feel hurt. Have you ever experienced that feeling? I remember one of my patients, around 65 at the time. He told me that during family gatherings, his young son-in-law would sometimes make playful remarks. Not harsh words, but enough to make him feel disrespected. He stayed silent, not wanting to turn the dinner into an argument. But when he got home, he said his mind kept replaying that moment like an old record that wouldn't stop. He felt hurt, even angry at himself for not standing up for his own voice. You see, all of us, especially after the age of 50, have stood in such a situation at least once. A small remark, a dismissive look sometimes leaves a deeper scar than a loud argument. When I was young, I reacted immediately. I wanted to prove I wasn't weak. I wanted to defend my ego, to show the world my voice had weight. But as I grew older, I discovered a truth. Explosive reactions rarely bring victory. They only leave the heart exhausted. And this is where ancient Stoic philosophy entered my life like a silent teacher. The Stoics taught we cannot control what others say, but we have full control over how we respond. It sounds simple, but practicing it takes steady discipline. I often ask my patients, and I want to ask you now, when was the last time your heart felt heavy because of a careless word? Do you remember how it stole your sleep? How you replayed the moment again and again, searching for a late answer? Modern science calls this the Zeigarnik effect, the brain's tendency to hold on to unfinished business, an unresolved story, a word left unanswered. It lingers, taking up space in your mind. The Stoics knew this thousands of years ago. They emphasized the power of inner silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence at the right time is strength. When you don't react, you don't let others define your worth. You create a space of pause where wisdom can appear. I remember Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Anger and grief harm us more than the things that cause them." Think about it. Doesn't that ring true? When you're angry, your heart races, your blood pressure rises, your mind tightens. Others may forget their words instantly, but you carry the emotional burden for days, even weeks. So what's the solution? Not avoidance, not pretending nothing happened, but learning to sit with the feeling without letting it control you. When someone belittles you, you may choose silence, but let that silence be an affirmation, not a surrender. You don't have to answer every challenge. Your calmness is the clearest response. Picture this. Think of an older friend you admire, maybe a former teacher, a neighbor, or a family elder. When they speak, they don't need fancy words. They don't need to raise their voice. But their presence, their calm, brings silence to the whole room. People stop and they listen. Have you noticed that such people never need to prove themselves? They are living proof of the calm they have cultivated for a lifetime. As I entered my 60s, I realized something simple. Most battles we fight just to prove ourselves are not worth it. What's worth it is keeping the soul unshaken by small things. That is true freedom. So my friend, next time someone hurts you with a careless word, pause and remember, you have a choice. You can let it occupy your mind, or you can step back, take a deep breath, and give yourself the gift of silence. That silence is not defeat. It is a quiet victory, the victory of self-mastery. And that victory no one can take away from you. My dear friend, after realizing that anger or impulsive reactions only exhaust the heart, we move on to a deeper secret, the power of absence. It may sound paradoxical, doesn't it? But it's the very gaps, the moments we're not present, that can leave the strongest mark in someone's mind. I want you to recall an experience. Have you ever read a novel or watched a movie and just as it reached the climax, it stopped. The story was cut short, leaving you waiting for the next episode. How did you feel? Didn't your mind keep circling around that unfinished ending? This is what's called the Zeigarnik effect, the human brain's tendency to replay unfinished business. And you know what? Relationships work the same way. One of my patients, Helen, now 58, once told me she could never forget an old friend, not because they spoke often, but because he never finished his words. Once in the middle of a story, he had to leave suddenly, leaving much unsaid. She told me, for years I kept wondering what he was going to say next. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes what we remember is not the complete, but the incomplete. The Stoics understood this well. Seneca once advised, never reveal your whole heart at once. Leave space so that others will hunger to know more. Mystery in completeness. These are the fertile grounds where curiosity grows. Have you noticed? When someone is always around texting, non-stop calling, constantly, they become ordinary, even boring. But when a person knows how to appear and then disappear, when they leave you with a comma instead of a period, they plant in you an unfinished desire. In my life, I found this lesson true not only in love or personal relationships. It also applies to work, to being a teacher, a father, a mentor. I recall when I used to teach, there were times I purposely didn't answer all of a student's question. I left a gap, and that gap forced them to think, to seek the answer themselves. Years later, they returned to tell me that the lessons they remembered most were the ones I didn't finish. You see, absence is not laziness or neglect. It is an art. The art of leaving a mark through emptiness. The art of planting in another person's mind an unfinished business, a puzzle they can't quite complete. And that makes you unforgettable. I want you to ask yourself, in your relationships, are you leaving the necessary gaps? Or are you trying to fill every moment with constant presence? The Stoics would advise, give others the space to miss you. When you disappear for a while, you're not truly gone. You're simply giving them the chance to realize your value. Just like in music, it's the silence between notes that makes the melody meaningful. So next time, instead of trying to prove yourself by being constantly present, step back. Let your absence become a quiet reminder that you don't need to be loud to live in someone's mind. My dear friend, have you ever listened to an old song and suddenly memories came flooding back, just a few notes and an entire youth returns? Or maybe you walked past a familiar street, saw a little cafe, and instantly thought of a certain face. That's not a coincidence. That's how our brain works. It ties memories to specific triggers. In psychology, this is called anchoring memory anchors. And this is the second secret to becoming unforgettable in someone's mind. Become an anchor in their memory. I remember one of my patients, Susan, now 62. She told me her husband, though he passed away many years ago, still lives in her memory. Why? Because every time she hears an old song, smells the morning coffee, or simply hears the familiar phrase, "All right, sweetheart," he comes back. She said, "I don't need to see him. Those little triggers are enough to make me feel like he's right here with me." You see, people who leave the deepest marks on us don't need to be there all the time. Sometimes they just leave a small symbol, a thing attached to them. And every time we encounter that trigger, the mind calls their name. The Stoics also understood this power. Epictetus once said, "Use small reminders, for they awaken memory more than loudness ever could." When we tie ourselves to a signal, we plant a seed in someone's mind, a seed that may sprout any time. Imagine this: in a conversation, you always have a special greeting, different from everyone else. Instead of saying hello like others, you start with, "Hey superstar," or "My friend, how's your journey today?" At first, it may sound unusual, but believe me, one day when they hear someone else say superstar, you'll be the first person they think of, or you can leave a mark with a small habit. An old friend of mine, every time he sent a letter, he signed it with a little sun symbol under his name. Over 30 years later, whenever I see that symbol anywhere, my mind instantly returns to those younger days. Let me ask you, in your life, is there someone that just a small trigger, a phrase, a song, a meal, immediately brings them back to you? If so, you understand what a memory anchor is. And this is the secret many overlook. They think to be remembered, they must show up often and strongly. But the truth is, a single trigger tied to emotion is enough to make someone remember you forever. I still recall a small story from my class. There was a student who always began his answers with the phrase, "If you ask me honestly." It sounded simple, but later, whenever anyone in class heard that phrase, even years later, they laughed and said, "That's him." You see, sometimes just a little habit becomes a memory anchor. The Stoics would advise this: choose something simple yet unique to be your signature. It doesn't need to be grand. It could be your way of greeting, the way you listen, or even a meal you often share with others. What matters is not the size, but the emotional bond you weave into it. Neuroscience explains that our brain is highly associative. It constantly links objects, sounds, images with emotions. Once you tie yourself to a trigger, even when you're not there, that trigger will call your name in someone's mind. So ask yourself, what will be your anchor? A phrase, a symbol, a habit, or a small act full of meaning? Once you find it, you don't need to show up all the time to be remembered. The world around them will remind them of you. And in this way, you become a part of their memory, a part not easily erased. My dear friend, there's something fascinating neuroscience has proven. The human brain doesn't always remember details, but it holds on to emotions for a very long time. We may forget the exact words someone once said, but we rarely forget how they made us feel. And this is the third secret to becoming unforgettable in someone's mind, leaving a strong emotional imprint. I remember a patient named Robert, 67 years old, who once confided to me, "I can't recall the exact words my wife spoke on our wedding day, but I remember the trembling in her voice. And I remember my heart nervous yet overflowing with joy." You see, the details fade, but the feelings live on. In every relationship, it's not constant presence that makes us unforgettable, but the powerful emotional moments left behind. It might be a laugh so strong you cried, a deep silence shared between two people, or even a fierce argument that changed you. Those are the moments etched in memory. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We are shaped more by the experiences we carry in our soul than by the words we hear." So if you want to be unforgettable, don't just offer surface presence. Leave real emotional resonance. You may ask, how do we create an emotional imprint? It doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes a single deep question is enough. I once asked a former student, if you could meet your 20-year-old self again, what would you say years later when we met again? He told me that question still haunted and inspired him. You see, sometimes one question can touch the deepest part of the soul. Sometimes even a small act is enough to plant an unforgettable feeling. A friend of mine had the habit of making his wife a cup of tea every night for decades. After he passed away, each time she held that cup, tears fell not because of the tea, but because of the love tied to it. That is an emotional imprint. Science also shows that memories tied to strong emotions are stored in the amygdala. This means moments that bring great joy, pain, or deep emotion are stored in the brain as memories not easily erased. Have you ever remembered someone for years not because of the details of the story, but simply because of the special feeling they gave you? If so, you already understand what an emotional imprint is. The Stoics would advise become a giver of emotion, not just presence. When you speak, speak sincerely. When you listen, listen with your whole heart. When you share, don't be afraid to show a little vulnerability, because those are the moments that touch the deepest parts of memory. Picture this. One day, someone sits alone, hears an old song, and suddenly remembers you. Not because you texted every day, but because you once planted an emotion deep enough that the memory rises with the music. That is the power of emotional imprint. You see, life is not measured by how many times we show up, but by the emotions we leave behind. People may forget your face, forget your words, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that is what makes you unforgettable. My dear friend, we've already walked through 3 secrets together, knowing when to step away to create longing, leaving a memory signal like an invisible anchor, and creating powerful emotional imprints. But the real secret isn't in these pieces alone. The power comes when you weave them together into a cycle, a natural rhythm. I call it the 3-in-1 cycle. Imagine it like this. You show up, make a small connection, plant a personal signal, maybe a witty remark, maybe a small shared memory. You leave behind a bit of emotion, perhaps laughter, perhaps quiet reflection. Then you step away, leaving space. And in your absence, that signal and that emotion echo in the other person's mind. Then when you return, you begin the second round, a new signal, a new emotion, another short disappearance. With every cycle, you grow deeper in their memory. I remember a former student named James. He wasn't someone who showed up often, nor was he particularly striking in appearance. But every time he spoke, James left behind a clever joke and then disappeared for a while. The next time, he returned with a profound question that made the whole class reflect. Gradually, even though he wasn't always present, everyone remembered him. One girl in the class said something I'll never forget. I don't know why, but even when he isn't here, I keep thinking about him. That you see is the power of the 3-in-1 cycle: presence, imprint, withdrawal. It's like breathing. If you only inhale without exhaling, you suffocate. If you only exhale without inhaling, you collapse. But with rhythm, in and out, appearing and disappearing, life flows in harmony. The Stoics too saw life as a cycle. They said there are moments to step out and act and moments to retreat and reflect. If you're always out there, you lose depth. If you're always hidden away, you lose connection. Only when you balance the two are you truly remembered. Let me ask you, in your relationships, are you inhaling too much or exhaling too much? Are you showing up so constantly that mystery is lost, or disappearing so long that people stop remembering you? The key is rhythm. A beautiful piece of music is not made by notes alone, but also by the pauses between them. A painting is not made beautiful only by color, but also by the empty spaces. And a person becomes unforgettable, not by being there all the time, but by creating special moments and then stepping back at the right time. My dear friend, practice this cycle in daily life. When speaking with loved ones, don't rush to say everything at once. Leave an open question so they think of you even after the conversation ends. When you create a joyful or touching moment, let that feeling settle inside them instead of covering it with more words. And when you step back, do so with confidence, knowing that the space you leave is a true gift. Life, when used well, becomes a symphony. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to show up every moment. You just need to breathe a soul into each encounter, so that even when you are no longer there, others still hear the echo of your melody in their minds. My dear friend, when we gather everything we've shared, the power of absence, the memory anchors, the emotional imprints, and the 3-in-1 cycle, we discover a simple yet profound truth. Life is not measured by how often we appear, but by the marks we leave in the hearts of others. The ancient Stoics did not teach us how to be loud or flashy. They taught us how to live with discipline, how to keep peace in the mind, and how to become a person whose presence, whether rare or frequent, always carries value. I remember another patient, George, 71 years old. He lived a turbulent life, once a busy businessman with many friends, But in the end, he realized people didn't remember him for the loud parties or the glamorous business trips. What his grandchildren still talk about are the simple evenings when he sat with them telling a short story that left a deep feeling. Those stories, those messages became his true legacy. You see, when we reach our 50s, 60s, or beyond, we no longer chase the need to prove our presence everywhere. We begin to understand just a few genuine moments, a few mental anchors, and a few deep emotions are enough for our name to live on in the memory of others. The Stoics remind us some things are beyond our control, but how we live, how we influence, and how we leave our imprint that will always belong to us. And when you choose to leave your mark with calmness, with discipline, with deep affection, then even in your absence, your presence will continue to echo. I want you to ask yourself, if one day you no longer walk into that familiar room, what will people remember about you? Will they recall complaints and tension? Or will they remember your calmness, your laughter, and the sense of safety you gave them? Don't worry if today's answer doesn't satisfy you, because there is still time. And each day you live, you have the chance to plant a new anchor, to create a new imprint, to build another 3-in-1 cycle that makes you unforgettable. Start simply. A kind word, a timely smile, a moment of silence that gives someone else a space to reflect. These small things over time will form the larger picture of you in their memory. My dear friend, life in later years is not a period at the end of the sentence. It is a rest note in the music, a pause that lets you choose how to play the remaining notes beautifully and completely. And from that selectiveness, from that peace, you will leave behind a legacy, not material wealth, but a spiritual inheritance in the hearts of those who crossed paths with you.